Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha. You're watching Perspective, in which today we are going to talk about the newly released Environmental Performance Index 2022. Published by the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy and the Center for International Earth Science Information Network, the index has used 40 performance indicators across 11 categories to judge the environmental health and sustainability of countries. Now, among 180 countries that have been ranked, India has been placed at the bottom with a paltry score of 18.9, while the other countries in the bottom 5 include Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam and Myanmar. India, of course, has rebutted and raised questions on this report. In a statement, the Union Environment Ministry said, and I quote, "The Environmental Performance Index 2022, released recently, has many indicators based on unfounded assumptions, and some of these indicators used for assessing performance are extrapolated and based on surmises and unscientific methods." So that's what the Environment Ministry has said. So what are the issues that India has flagged? What indicators have been used in the index that place India at the bottom? Also, how are the assessments and calculations done? We'll discuss some of these aspects and more on the program today with an eminent panel of experts who are joining me on the program. So let me first introduce them to you. With me in the studio is Mr. R.R. Rashmi, former Special Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. Thank you, sir, for your time and welcome to Sansad TV. And joining us virtually are two distinguished panelists, Mr. Chandra Bhushan, CEO, International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology. Welcome to Sansad TV, Mr. Bhushan. And Dr. Sachidanand Tripathi, Professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, with a specialization in air quality and climate change. Professor, welcome to Sansad TV. Thank you for your time. Mr. Bhushan, let me begin the program today with you. Your response to the Environmental Performance Index 2022, and especially because it comes just a few months after the Climate Change Performance Index, which placed India at the 10th position globally and also rated India high among performance in indicators like GHG emissions, energy use, climate policy targets, also medium in renewable energy. Now, for India to be ranked at the bottom among 180 countries in this EPI report, what do you make of both these reports and how different are these two?
Thank you, Tina. My first response is that EPI did not deserve a television program. Okay, it is not a rating we should be spending our energy and time. It's a very badly designed rating. It is difficult to rate countries on single parameters, but to bring 40 parameters together and then say you are a good country and the other one is a bad country is a very challenging task to start with. But what EPI has done even worse is that they have not even attempted to do it right. The indicators they have used are based on certain value system. They have their own worldview in which the world is flat, in which everyone, if you are white and rich and you are consuming a lot, you are a good country. If you are a poor, overly populated, poor country, which with many, many challenges, you are a bad country. Mm-hmm. So even the baseline they have used to rank countries are very poorly designed. Now, coming back to climate change index, it has its own worldview. It is using a worldview where it is recognizing that there are poor countries, there are rich countries, there are countries with large population, the countries with small population. So it has used a different baseline. And this is what is the tragedy of global ranking. They all project their own worldview. And the problem is the more we keep responding to these ratings, we are getting into this quagmire of discussion, and rather than focusing on the issue that we need to focus on. Okay, so I'm not happy with climate change index either. I don't think it's a perfect rating system. It is boosting our ego. We are not doing that well on climate change. Okay, but EPI, it is a badly designed rating. We are not that bad either.
Okay.
So both the rating systems, I don't think we should be spending time. India should be thinking about developing a rating for its own assessment. We should be developing our own rating. We should be assessing our own progress and then benchmarking ourselves. Why should we be responding to some university doing this rating, which is absolutely, it will not stand any scientific scrutiny.
Absolutely. So our policy response has to be in sync with the kind of challenges that we face, and accordingly. Mr. Rashmi, let me come to you for your response. Do you agree with Mr. Bhushan that this is largely, a report which has its own worldview, and a lot of the indicators that it actually takes into account, on which India has also registered and rebutted sort of on several parameters? So what largely are India's concerns is another aspect that I want you to address on this program. How different are these indicators which have been used in both the CCPI index and the EPI that we are talking about?
Thank you, Tina. I largely agree with Chandra Bhushan. As far as the index itself is concerned, the problem with any of such indices is that they have to be based on certain parameters and the indicators. So it depends, the performance of a country or any entity that is ranked will depend on the choice of the parameters and the weight which is assigned to the indicators. Now in this case, as Chandra Bhushan was pointing out, there are 40 indicators across 11 categories. It's a very large quantum of data, and naturally you can make mistakes there. And not only mistakes, some of the choices and some of the weights which are assigned, they are arbitrary. And if you look at the history of this index, which was designed sometime in 2004 and 5 onwards, it has become a performance index. Earlier it was called a sustainability index. The parameters have kept changing every year. And there is no consistent comparison or ranking of the countries. Because if you don't have consistent parameters and same weights, you cannot rank them in terms of a particular status for the last 10 years. So there is the methodology itself is faulty here. And the important thing as far as India is concerned is that it's not just environment. I mean, this particular index talks of ecosystem vitality, environmental health, and then there are a number of other categories. But then the issues like social and the economic performances, which are also equally a part of sustainability. I mean, sustainability is actually on 3 dimensions, yes. Not just environment, but social and economic as well. Now, those data are hardly captured in this index. So if you look at that kind of data, then the results will be very, very different. And that's what happens in the case of climate change performance index, where the policies are rated against climate change policies and not against a host of other policies which are assigned importance according to the global worldview. I mean, it's very easy to use the right word, because there are global targets, there are global goals, but there are also national goals. So the national circumstances and the national goals which are actually recognized under the Paris Agreement are very different. So I won't I won't lose my sleep over this kind of status assigned by EPI, but there is certainly a need for India to voice its concern. And the one reason why this index hasn't captured fully the Indian position is that those indicators which can do justice to India's performance are not captured here. For example, energy, the emissions intensity, the energy efficiency, or the share of renewable energy, the work done in the renewable energy sector. Now, these are efficiency indicators, which are the sectoral indicators which are not captured here.
Absolutely, and all of these aspects are very, very important part of sustainability when we talk about, and these very parameters, when they were judged, India had been positioned 10th, in fact in 2020 also in the CCPI. So it's I think this difference of sorts on a similar report which has captured Indian attention. But Professor Tripathi, one concern that has arisen is that, this is not the first time that the EPI has been released. And on this particular index, India has not fared well over the years. So even back in 2018, back in 2020, our position has never been among the top. We've always fared somewhere, at the bottom of the index. What has been particularly the change this time around that has captured the attention, of course, of the Indian people as well, and also this kind of response that the Indian government, the Union Environment Ministry has released this statement questioning that the basis of assessment has been unscientific and that it's been extrapolated. So this kind of response coming in particularly this year, when this is not the first time that the EPI has come up.
Yeah, I think some of the very philosophical, issues connected with this report, Chandra Bhushan and Mr. Rashmi already have shared their thoughts. But if you see that, across these 3 policy objectives, and there are 11 issues and then 40 indicators, that the weights which were mentioned before, the weights assigned has been rather inconsistent. And I don't see there is a very solid theoretical basis. For example, 40% each have been assigned to the climate change and ecological vitality, and 20% to the environment health. That doesn't justify. And then if you start looking into the 11 these issues, and within that whatever those 40 parameters they have, then again the distribution of weights doesn't seem to be very, very good. Why I say that? Now, for example, if you look into environmental health, there are a couple of these issues as they mentioned. For example, solid waste management, or water and sanitation, or within air quality, there is a solid fuel consumption for indoor energy uses. We know that there has been some very important, significant government programs in last 7 to 8 years, and that have given some very positive output from that. And in fact, if you look at their relative ranking, the trend, in fact, in some of them, India has actually paced ahead. It is either placed at 120, 125, 130. So, but now if you see, environmental health as a basket has only been given 20% weight overall. So you see that on some of those issues where India is doing considerably well, because of the very low weight assigned, now the overall weighted index would bring it down. Now, the second point, what was mentioned before, was basically overall greenhouse gas emissions vis-a-vis the per capita emission. So that is a very important point, which has been a very considered India's stand for long. Now, if you are trying to look into that and then discounting for some of the major policy initiatives which have been taken in last, again, 7 to 8 years, and which, for example, let's say our rapid expansion into solar, which can create enormous sink and extraction for carbon dioxide from atmosphere, both ways. Now that has not figured at all into the first basket, which is the climate change. So some of these actually are very, there are some very clear academic flaws here, which cannot be simply be, wishy-washy that by saying that you contact them for the data. When I was trying to look into the report for details and was trying to look into their methods, that what actual method they have followed, these are all not apparent.
Okay, so Mr. Rashmi, when these changes are made, so for example, what Mr. Tripathi is suggesting, that the weight of the indicators on which India was performing well and the weight of those indicators was reduced, as has been done in this particular case. What is the basis, number one, of doing so? And is there any explanation later on when this is done of the country that, these are the kind of changes that have been done in this particular year in the report? So how is it done? Help us understand.
But that's the problem with an index like this. The choice is of the indicators is completely arbitrary. They don't have any worldwide or international consultation on the process and the methodology which they follow. And they keep changing the weights as it pleases them. For example, climate change. This had a weight of just about 20%. Now the weight is 30%.
But considering the fact that, it is done in collaboration with a body like the World Economic Forum as well, shouldn't there be more accountability?
No, that's true. I mean, so the process is completely opaque and non-transparent as of now. Of course, there are reputed world organizations attached with this, and there is also a panel of international experts who are presumably consulted when designing this index. But I think the process is very, very non-transparent, and the sources from where the data is collected, that's also questionable and unverified, because I haven't heard of, or I haven't come across any of this data being sourced from organizations like the government sources or important bodies which are present in this country. So it's all a very random process, very non-transparent process. So that is partly part of the problem. But the other issue is that the range of parameters which have to be chosen for a sound index, sound and robust index like this, has to be comprehensive. and it has to meet all the tests of rationality and effectiveness. And for that, there are a number of other indexes also in the market available. For example, there are some institutions which are constructing an index called Green Growth Index, which doesn't look only at environment, but looks at the social inclusion, the market and the investment, and the efficiency of the sectors, the decarbonization process in the transport, buildings, the manufacturing, etc. In addition to environment, which is about environmental health quality, the air quality, and the availability of natural resources. So the range of parameters has to be very wide, and the process of consultation has to be comprehensive. Unfortunately, that doesn't take place. So we can't assign much importance to these indexes.
Okay.
See, on the other hand, there are, under the auspices of United Nations, there is already an indexing taking place for the SDGs. Why are we not talking about the SDGs? They are comprehensive goals. And India's rank out of 193 countries there is about 117 there. It's not at the bottom. Of course, it's not very good either. So there are problems. It's not that the problems of environmental nature don't exist in India. I mean, the problem of pollution and degradation of resources is evident.
Of course. And talking of problems, so let me take that to Mr. Chandrabhushan. You know, India, especially in recent years, the kind of environmental challenges that we've begun to face, be it about air, water, land degradation, as Mr. Rashmi was pointing out, also coastal erosion. So, you know, I think all kinds of environmental challenges that we face, of course, there have been efforts, but I think not as much as would be required to, you know, meet our targets, of course, of 2030. And the fact that COVID pandemic sort of also has derailed a lot of our efforts in that regard. So considering the challenges and the efforts, what more should we be doing, particularly when we are at this vulnerable stature, when we are being directly affected, impacted by adverse climate change events?
I think Mr. Rashmi, was on the point when he said that we have many problems. I don't think we should gloss over the issue that India doesn't have environmental problem. We have major environmental problems.
Absolutely.
From air pollution to water scarcity, you can see what is happening today with heat waves. You take any environmental parameter, we will have to do a lot more than what we are doing.
Yes.
In fact, I was hoping that we will use COVID as an opportunity to usher in green growth in this country. That was an opportunity because COVID is a trailer to what could happen in case of extreme climate change when it strikes the country. And we are one of the most vulnerable countries as far as climate change impacts are concerned.
Yes.
So we have to do a lot more. Let's not, put this issue at the back burner. We are not doing enough. That is also clear. Okay. My bottom line is that these rankings, EPI ranking, for example, we are, I find it really problematic when some global body gives us a good ranking, we go out, we announce it to the town, government, okay? We give a lot of value to that. When someone is rating us bad, then we scream from the top of the roof. The question is that government has to have a very, dispassionate response to international rating. This rating did not require the kind of response that government has given. Okay, simply because any serious researcher who's working on environmental field know how bogus this rating is. Okay, I can give you an example. This rating has rated Eritrea, which is next to Ethiopia, as best country on tree cover loss. Okay, Eritrea doesn't have even 100 hectares of dense forest. So if you pick up even basic indicators, the researchers and experts and advisors who have worked on these ratings do not understand the basic of ranking itself, which is normalization. So I don't think that we should be, going around the town talking if we are rated very well and then keep criticizing if we are rating very badly. Okay, we should have our own stand, and therefore I'm saying India needs to have its own ranking, and I'm very happy Niti Aayog is doing that. You look at Niti Aayog rating on aspirational district or Niti Aayog rating on water. Some of these ratings are fantastic. These are our own benchmark to see how states are progressing over a period of time. And I think this is what we should be doing. We are in trouble We need to have a ranking. Let's not go around looking at how others are viewing us, because others are viewing us with a very squint eye. Okay, it is quite clear. And therefore develop our own rating schemes.
Okay, let me come across to you, Dr. Tripathi, with that important point that Mr. Bhushan made, that we should not be bogged by how the world is viewing at us and about these indexes which, keep coming up more often. But the fact that within the country, there are environmentalists, there are analysts who say that India has not prioritized economic development over environmental sustainability. How much of that holds merit according to you? And do you believe that India needs to revise its strategy when it comes to having policies which are sustainable in the longer run?
No, I mean, some of the points what Rashmi ji mentioned are very valid, that there is definitely a push towards equitable growth that has not been factored into this rating, but let's keep that rating aside. We definitely need to kind of align our development goals in a way that they become more sustainable. I agree with both of the panelists that at the top level, if you look at our hierarchical governance, at the top level, definitely there's a lot that is happening which is going towards achieving the sustainable development goals. But as you trickle down, as you go down, from the central to the state and the district level or city level, I think we need to create more capacity in the people in their understanding towards issues of sustainability. Now, that requires that we need to start some very, institutional, in a very institutional way, that where more programs are created for training people in sustainability, towards training in the issues of water, air, and climate change. Unless we have people at the district and city level, we have the kind of governance who think about creating sustainable cities. And when I say city, I'm not looking only into the urban areas. In fact, going beyond cities, that's why I'm also using the word districts. Unless we create that mindset within the government setup at that level, I think it would become more difficult to achieve the sustainable development goals. And that's what is required.
Okay, Mr. Rashmi, one important aspect that he pointed out was, of course, a lot should be done at all levels. But do we also face this problem when it comes to implementation, effective implementation of the measures, of the laws that we already have in place? So there are umpteen number of laws to protect the environment. There are regulations in place. There are institutions which are mandated with, ensuring that these laws are implemented, but they're not effectively implemented. Is that a problem that we are still dealing with? And is that the biggest hurdle in helping us achieve the targets that we are looking at?
Yeah, very true. In fact, Mr. Tripathi is absolutely right when he talks of implementation challenges. India has some of the finest laws relating to environment, and not just environment. In fact, you look at the entire spectrum of policy making. The problem is that of governance at the grassroots level, and that depends on a number of factors. We have created institutions, but we have starved them of resources. They don't have capacity, they don't have skills, and they don't have the required, the political strength to actually implement the regulations which we have created. So the problem is partly resource-based. We have set the goals, environmental goals for us, but they are mostly in the national laws. At the state level, the states have no commitment to environment, and they don't have the capacity to implement those environmental regulations. The pollution control boards are there, the state government machineries are there, and different agencies exist there, but they don't have the required resources. So the major problem at the state level is that they have major developmental challenges, and they have to divert resources to meet other goals which are perceived to be globally important. But at the grassroots level, what is locally and nationally important is something else. So that is a conflict of the policy, policy goals. And I won't say that we are not able to make good environmental regulations, but we are not able to implement them because we lack the required resources, we lack the required institutions. The institutions means we have the pollution control boards, or the ministries and the departments exist, but they don't have the required commitment.
Okay, one final comment from you, Mr. Bhushan. Each time we talk about the challenges and these shortcomings, of course, are something that they come up. But always the final word has to be on how do we get rid of these shortcomings? What is the kind of steps that are required to, ensure that the mechanisms which are already in place are functional and functional in a way that they do not become a hurdle towards achieving these targets that we have set for ourselves?
Well, the answer is very simple. Environment has to be part of our growth story. Okay, right now our growth story is all environmentally destructive activity. We are burning a large amount of fossil fuels, our deforestation, land degradation, many things that you see which are environmentally destructive are adding to our GDP. Now, what about creating more jobs, growing the economy for protecting the environment? We can grow our GDP, make money, create more jobs by planting trees, by saving our soil, by cleaning our air. There are millions of jobs that can be created. So I think the basic idea has to change from the perspective that you need to destroy the environment, you need to exploit the environment to create wealth. Now, if that changes to another perspective where how do we create wealth by protecting the environment, a lot of dichotomy that people talk about in terms of gap between policy and implementation will vanish. Because let's be very clear about it, that even, we say that our policies are very good, but I think unfortunately our policies are not taking into consideration the ground reality. Okay, if you make beautiful policy which has no resonance on the ground, then it is actually a very bad policy.
Absolutely. So I think in the longer run, we have to ensure that good economics is not seen differently with good environment. So both have to, both are related and both have to be seen in tandem. So that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program today. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. Pleasure having you on the program today. So that's it from us, viewers, on this edition of Perspective. Thanks very much for your time as well. See you same time tomorrow now with another topic and a different set of panelists. Until then, take care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.